Okay, what's going on, yo? I know this is about my Astros book, so pardon the Turner Field shirt. This is an update about my book about the late 60s and early 70s Houston Astros and what could have been with them. I had the privilege, a little under an hour ago, of speaking with former Astros executive at the time, Tal Smith. He's still around and still sharp, still a nice guy. And we had a 25-minute call. And he gave, what I did was I had emailed him my roster from last week. And he looked at it. And I gotta tell you, for 90 years old, he's still sharp. And he said that there were a few different things that he saw that were not really really good ground to stand on with the roster alone. So let me see if I can share my screen here. I believe I can. Is that the mail? I think it is. All right. There's the mail. All right. So here's the roster that you see here. Okay. One of the things that he mentioned was that the coaching staffs had 4, maybe 5 guys rather than, this many guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 coaches and a manager. Okay. So this would have to be trimmed down. You didn't really have quote-unquote bench coaches. That term wasn't really popular at the time, according to Smith. So I would have to trim this down. That's not really a problem. I can do that. And then, of course, he mentioned some of the blaring things about, he mentioned Dave Justy here. How we've got both Justy and Johnny Edwards on the same team, even though they were traded for each other. So there's double dipping there. Same goes for Staub and Billingham here. And of course, my initial thought was to leave it open-ended. But after talking to Smith, I think more so that in order for this book to be really legitimate and for it to really be something that people can have a lot of faith in the final results, I think that's too big of a question mark. I think it's too open-ended for a lot of members of the Houston Sabre chapter and a lot of knowledgeable Astros fans. So I would have to touch on that. So, that would be – obviously we want Rusty Staub, so Jack Billingham would have to go. Then between Justy and Edwards having to choose which one of those is more important. And then he's talking about, well, if you're just going to reverse trades, well, you got to do it with the other teams as well. And I knew when he started saying that was going to send me down a rabbit hole. But he mentioned even the Reds about, okay, well, why not just reverse the Frank Robinson trade, the Kurt Flood trade, the Jimmy Wynn trade? That's an outfield right there. Cookie Rojas, Tony Gonzalez, Johnny Edwards, and, how good that Reds team would have been before the Big Red Machine. And so, he went further into detail than I am right now. But, he also mentioned even alone, even without all that, 1970 and 1971, just those seasons, the Astros finished with a record of 79 and 83. And so this team would have had to make up between 11 and 23 games. 11 in 1971, 23 in 1970. And, of course, I think my thought was you start back from, the beginnings of the franchise and for the Colt 45's days, and of course from 1965 when the Astros name was adopted and the dome was opened, and the home field advantage that brought along, and start the development from there, then the culture could have been built up to be more optimistic rather than just a so-so kind of culture in the clubhouse, especially if a guy like Harry Walker is not the manager. And that's something that Smith felt was valid. So he felt like if I was going to write this book, if I was going to do this, that the better argument would be to focus on homegrown players for every team, not just the Astros. Obviously, focusing on the Astros, but if you're going to be compared to other teams, focus on the homegrown with other teams. And so here in the starting lineup, that would have all of them except for Jimmy Wynn, I think, because he was gotten from the Reds. For the 5 starters, Mike Cuellar would be gone. The bullpen, Justy, and on the bench was I think Mayberry. And that's it, as far as the homegrown players. And I would agree with that. I think that's a good point. Thinking about it now. Because I do see where there is some patchwork, So, we're going to have Justy and Edwards, Staub and Bellingham. Heck, you're going to have not Staub, you're going to have Grody and Edwards. That's something Larry Durker mentioned. You'd have to trade either Grody or Edwards. And then, again, the coaching staff thing, trim that down. That's not that much of a concern. But yeah, he went on and on. And he knows his stuff. Of course he would, because, he was the general manager of the Astros in 1966. He shared those duties with Grady Hatton and Spec Richardson, but, he was there. So he would know. And so there would be a lot of work here that I would need to do to get this fixed up. He mentioned if you didn't have Jimmy Wynn, then there's, Staub, Cedeno, and Watson in the outfield. And John Mayberry, to play first base, was on the bench. There's your roster. But even if you have all that, then if you're considering how good the Reds were, the Reds alone, not even considering other teams, then, of course, then you have to see how the other teams would have developed too. Because, if you have an outfield in Cincinnati of Frank Robinson, Kurt Flood, and Jimmy Wynn in some order or another, then what happens when that team meets the Big Red Machine, of Pete Rose and, Tony Perez, some of the younger guys that come up then, there would be a bunch that I would have to do. And so on a superficial level, I think what I've done here is fine. Just imagining things and thinking about, how great this would have been, But as far as writing a book and expecting it to resonate with people who have been around, I think I did not estimate that properly. And so now I'm glad that I heard what I did from Tal Smith. I think Larry Durker would probably have some similar things to say about it. Some members of the Sabre chapter, Tal Smith said a lot of them would probably notice the same things that he noticed. So, and even if I were to correct the entire roster and get it to all the homegrown players only, and then go and correct all the other teams, which would be painstaking. I don't know if I feel like doing all that. And then seeing how those teams would develop, because again, when you had the big red machine of the very late 60s and early 70s coming up, combined with the good teams of the Reds that they had in the early and mid 60s, how does it affect this team, and how do they clash or form together? What moves does the front office make? And yeah, we can have some hypotheticals, but now I'm beginning to think a hypothetical. Beginning to think that a hypothetical situational book isn't going to bring the appeal. It's not going to capture the attention and the appreciation of the people who were there, whether they were on the team, whether they were fans. And they would notice a lot of flaws. That's okay. I'm not, offended or, saddened at all. I'm thinking what to do. I'll be honest. This could all go down the drain and this book not happen. That would be unfortunate. I've put together the slideshow of stuff, and see all these sources in my bibliography. And the hotels they stayed at, the uniform, the timeline, the Astrodome, the managers, the front office, the players, all here. So I've done a lot here. However, I don't want to put something out there that's not going to be successful, and it's not going to appeal to people, and it's not going to be respected because there'd be so many things to nitpick. And I certainly don't want to disrespect anyone else's knowledge who are, 60, 70 years old. By me, a 20-year-old come along and say, hey, this could have happened, and then it be full of patchwork and too much, too high in the sky of an imagination. That, and again, we can't know. We cannot actually know what would or could have been. And again, as the team did in 1970 and 71, they would have had to make up a good bit of games. And, not that the team couldn't have done it, from the development early on, and then it carries over into the 70s and then develop. Larry Durker said in his first book that he felt like, he could have pitched in the World Series in the early 70s. Ben Gibson of the History Press told me he felt like this was more of a chapter of a book rather than an entire book. I'm beginning to think this is maybe more of a blog article or something like that rather than an entire book. That's okay. I'm not upset in the slightest. I've not made a decision yet as to if I'm going to continue with this or not. I know that even if I corrected everything with the roster somehow, and that would include dealing with other teams too, and that alone, just correcting all the rosters would be a bunch of work. Then I'd have to go back and redo all the simulations I've already done. I don't think so. So, folks, this could be the end of the Orange Crush Astros book. That's okay by me. I am not upset. If I feel like that this is not going to be that good of a piece of literature, I don't want to put it out there. I don't want to write it. I don't want to put my name by something that's going to be so flawed and possibly so controversial. So, y'all let me know what you think. I don't want too many people to say, "Oh, keep it up, keep it up." I can't wait to read it and stuff like that. Give me some concrete stuff. And anybody who just says, "Oh, do what you want, do what makes you happy," I know it's my choice. I know. That's why I'm trying to ask y'all now. What do you actually think? Be honest. I know Tal Smith's only one person. Mike Vance said he had no quibbles with the roster other than possibly Grady Hatton being the manager and Cesar Geronimo not being on the bench. Larry Durker was talking about, well, you'd have to trade Grody or Edwards. Tal Smith says a lot of the thoughts put into making of the roster are flawed in several different ways. Look at the roster. Look at how, I've done my simulations. Some of the streams are still up on the channel. You got any other questions, please ask. And let me know what you honestly think. All right? I was hoping to keep this under 20 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and end it here. I appreciate y'all. I appreciate y'all's time listening to me here. And I will see y'all next time.